Hey everybody, this is Mr. Mazzoro, and today we're going to talk about seaweed and marine plants. And I know that you probably didn't start taking marine science because you were dying to learn about seaweed and dying to learn about marine plants. However, what you have to understand is that seaweed and marine plants, they're basically everywhere in the marine environment, especially seaweed. It's everywhere in the marine environment. And it is an important primary producer in the marine environment. And I would be remiss as your marine science instructor if I didn't at least tell you a little something about seaweed. So what this lesson is basically everything you need to know, nothing you don't about seaweed, why and marine plants and how to differentiate between seaweed and marine plants and how marine scientists differentiate between seaweed and marine plants. So here we go. Seaweed, what is it? It is a multicellular photosynthetic algae, and that is the important part. It is an algae. Seaweed is not a plant. I repeat, seaweed is not a plant. Seaweed is not a plant. You can Google seaweed right now, and what will come up is that seaweed is a plant because it has weed in the name. However, that is incorrect. It is not a plant. It lacks the four characteristics that plants need in order to be plants. Instead, seaweed is an algae. Why isn't seaweed a plant? Why is it not considered a plant? Well, very, very simply, it looks like a plant, but it's not. Plants have three organs: roots, stems, and leaves. And seaweed has things that look like roots, things that look like stems, and things that look like leaves, but they're not root, stems, and leaves. Seaweed has a thing that looks like a root. That thing that looks like a root is a holdfast. And if you're taking notes, write that down. That's why that little bubble. Don't write the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. Write the name, holdfast. The holdfast is the rooty part of a seaweed. Roots absorb water and nutrients for plants. Holdfasts don't absorb water and nutrients. They're not roots, so they're not called roots. That's why seaweed isn't a plant, because it lacks roots along with stems and leaves. Holdfasts instead do what their name implies. They hold on to hard substrate at the bottom. They just secure the seaweed to the bottom of the ocean. Seaweed has things that look like stems, although they're not stems. They are called stipes. Write that down. Write in the number 2. Don't write number 2. You could just write stipe. Stipes look like stems. What do stems do? Well, stems support the leaves. They actually hold up the leaves and spread them out so all the leaves can get photosynthesis. All the leaves can get light for photosynthesis, not just the ones on the outside. Stipes don't do that. They don't support anything. The reason is because the seaweed's in water, and water is its own support. If there's no water, the stipe wouldn't be able to support the leafy parts of the seaweed. The seaweed would collapse on itself, like a pile of fall leaves. Instead, the stipes just attach the holdfast to the leafy parts of the seaweed, which aren't leaves, they're blades. Like leaves, blades photosynthesize for the algae in this case. However, blades are not leaves because leaves don't have a thing that blades have. Blades all have a pneumatocyst. Pneumato means air, cyst means pocket. Blades don't have an air pocket at their base or inside of them. Why would blades on a seaweed be filled with air or have a pocket of air? Well, because that pocket of air holds the blades closer to the surface of the water where they can photosynthesize because they can get more light. Blades are not leaves because leaves don't have pneumatocysts, blades do. Seaweed is not a plant because it lacks roots, stems, and leaves. Instead, it has holdfasts, stipes, and blades. Here's 3 common types of seaweed, just to wow you guys with my knowledge of seaweed. This is green seaweed, otherwise known as the phylum Chlorophyta. This is brown seaweed. I know it looks golden, but it's actually brown seaweed, bull kelp, otherwise known as the phylum Phaeophyceae. And this is red seaweed, otherwise known as Rhodophyta. Green seaweed is the most prolific of all marine algae and freshwater algae, seaweeds. Brown seaweed is the most commercially important, bull kelp. Red seaweed, there's more different species of red seaweed than any other seaweed in the marine environment. But that aside, I'm just showing you these pictures not because I want you to write them down, but because I'm pointing out how marine scientists most commonly differentiate between different types of seaweed, and that is by color. Seaweed is more often classified instead of Chlorophyta, Phaeophyceae, and Rhodophyta. green seaweed, brown seaweed, red seaweed. There's also purple seaweed, golden seaweed, etc., etc. And I've already said this, but it worth repeating. The reason that blades have pneumatocysts is to hold the blade closer to the surface so it can get more sunlight to photosynthesize with. So that's seaweeds. Let's transition to marine plants. Marine plants are plants. They have roots, they have stems, they have leaves, and they can be partially or completely submerged by seawater. There are 3 types of marine plants: seagrasses, cordgrasses, and mangroves. Of those 3, seagrass is the only true marine plant. Seagrass is the only true marine plant. It's the only marine plant that can be completely submerged all day and all night. In fact, it is completely submerged all day and all night, root stems and leaves, and even reproduces underwater. Cordgrass and mangroves cannot be completely submerged or they'll die. Instead, just portions of their plant body can be submerged for part of the day. If they ever become completely submerged, they die. This is especially evident in mangroves. Mangroves have these tangles of roots that do become submerged for part of the day, but what you'll notice is you can actually see them. They're not below the ground. In fact, they're above the ground. Why? Well, they're above the ground because, and I'll answer this in a second, they have to get oxygen. And those mangrove roots slow down the movement of water. Less water movement means less oxygen. And as a result, if they grew in the thick sediment that settles, that clay sediment that settles, they wouldn't be able to get oxygen enough to keep them alive, so they have to grow in the water themselves. Seagrass is the only true marine plant. Cordgrass and mangroves, really what's the difference? Because they both can be completely submerged. Well, the answer is climate. Cordgrass grows in more temperate climates. Mangroves, more tropical climates. So you have seagrass, the only completely submerged plant. Then you have cordgrass, temperate climates, mangroves, tropical climates. Those are your 3 main differentiations between the 3 main groups of marine plants. Again, mangrove roots grow above the ground so they can get oxygen. So that's it. What's seaweed? It's an algae. Why is it an algae and not a plant? Because it lacks root, stems, and leaves. Instead, it has blades, stipes, and holdfasts, which look the same but do completely different jobs than a plant's root, stems, and leaves. There are 3 basic marine plants. There's seagrass, cordgrass, and mangroves. Seagrass is the only true marine plant, the only plant that can be submerged all day and all night for its entire life cycle and live. Cordgrass and mangroves can't be completely submerged because they'll die. So what's the difference between them? Well, climate. Cordgrass grows in temperate climates. Mangroves grow in tropical climates. And mangroves are easily identifiable because they're trees whose roots are above the ground. The reason their roots are above the ground is so to get enough oxygen in order for the plant to live. So that's it for marine plants and seaweed. It was only 8 minutes. I hope it wasn't too bad. I know there's maybe seaweed scientists or marine plant or marine botanists out there that are slack-jawed at how much I left out with the with the seaweeds and marine plants. I also know that there are some of my marine science students that are now literally cheering that I didn't go on and on and on. But there you go. Like I said, everything you need to know, nothing you don't, about this kind of helicopter course over what is a seaweed, what is a marine plant, what is the difference between the two. Thanks a lot.